Hey guys! Anyone who is even remotely interested in dinosaurs will know of a debate that has been going on for years, and especially since the third Jurassic Park film. Yes, today we're not doing a species profile. Instead, we'll talk about something a little bit different. The big question amongst the paleontology community: T-Rex versus Spinosaurus, who would win? Now, we are going to touch upon this subject soon, but first I'm going to give you a disclaimer that any outcomes are purely based on my own reasoning and are simply from a logical perspective. Others' opinions might differ, so keep that in mind. Also, some of the content in this video might contain some gruesome elements, so viewer discretion is advised. While we are definitely going to evaluate this battle, the true purpose of today's video is to zoom out and look at these creatures' respective families as a whole. Spinosauridae versus Tyrannosauridae. Let me explain how this will work. I will select a lightweight, a midweight, and a heavyweight from each family, and whichever family wins the most battles will triumph. Another thing to note, however, is the fact that this evaluation only judges the combat ability of these animals. In reality, survival was more about success, who could survive longer in a certain environment, rather than physical prowess. First up, we have Baryonyx versus Dryptosaurus. Baryonyx, meaning heavy claw from the early Cretaceous, was somewhere in the middle of the size range of the Spinosauridae, measuring around 8 meters long and 1.5 tons in weight. It was named after its massive hooked claws, which it probably used to slice fish out of water. Unlike the larger Spinosaurus, Oxalia, and others, it did not possess a large sail, but its long arms and snout still hold the iconic Spinosaurid silhouette. It lived in modern Britain, but descended from the Baryonychinae subfamily, which included Suchomimus and several others. Fossil evidence has found that Baryonyx may have eaten a mixture of fish and land animals. This was proven when a combination of fish scales and partially digested iguanodon bones were found inside its ribcage, indicating that it had a relatively varied diet. Nevertheless, the iguanodon was a juvenile, so perhaps Baryonyx only ate meat when it wasn't much of a hassle. Let's look at the animal it will go against. Dryptosaurus was called tearing lizard for good reason. It was a tyrannosauroid, not a tyrannosaurid, which lived in the late Cretaceous of North America. Possessing an arsenal of powerful jaws and relatively long arms, each wielding a pair of 8-inch claws, it was smaller and faster than its more famous relative Tyrannosaurus, measuring between 7 and 8 meters long. Though shorter than Baryonyx, it was well suited for fighting other animals, as it could effectively use both its claws and jaws to subdue prey. Tyrannosauridae were actually pretty smart in comparison to other theropods, like abelisaurs, so it's possible that Dryptosaurus would have been able to form some sort of strategy. Round 1. Lightweight. In a woodland, a Baryonyx stands over a stream, observing the fish passing below the rushing surface of the water. It is about to swing a massive claw into the stream, but there is something else. Footsteps. The animal turns with a low chuff and spots a theropod standing 50 paces away. It is smaller and lighter, but watches the Baryonyx with a curious intensity. The Baryonyx barks once and brandishes its claws, but the Dryptosaurus hisses back, stepping closer. The Baryonyx is confused. Back in Europe, smaller Eotyrannus would flee from this display of claws, but this strange, large invader remains confident. Nevertheless, it charges forward. The Dryptosaurus sidesteps, hoping to evade the Baryonyx attack. It does, however, receive a gash in its leg. The Baryonyx reach is not to be underestimated. It has never met a Spinosaurid before, however. The Baryonyx is slow to react, and the Dryptosaurus reads this as an opportunity to sink its teeth into the animal's tail. Wrenching its tail out of the Dryptosaurus' mouth, the Baryonyx whirls round and snaps at the Tyrannosauroid. Both predators recoil, and the Dryptosaurus realizes that its muzzle is bleeding. The Baryonyx advances, and the Dryptosaurus lunges for the Baryonyx's neck. But halfway to its target, it is intercepted by a claw which tears through the left of its ribcage and causes its lung to collapse. Seconds later, the Dryptosaurus is spasming on the ground, and the Baryonyx stands over it, watching with a morbid curiosity as the Tyrannosauroid suffocates. It limps away, preparing to tend to its own wounds. So the Baryonyx takes the win, but it wouldn't walk away unscathed. Dryptosaurus lost primarily due to its inexperience in dealing with larger, heavier Spinosaurids. It was still a formidable predator, however, and I would say that it would win 1 in 3 fights. Again, though, neither animal ever met the other, as they lived at different times in different locations. For the midweights, let's take Suchomimus and Daspletosaurus. Suchomimus, meaning crocodile mimic, was, let's just say, truly enormous. 11 meters long and weighing over 3.5 tons, it was one of the largest Spinosaurids ever to exist. It possessed mighty arms with massive 30-centimeter thumb claw on each hand, capable of crippling or even killing fish and animals with just a few blows. Though it primarily was a piscivore, it had a more versatile build than the later Spinosaurus, allowing it to turn its attention to terrestrial dinosaurs if it felt like it. Living amongst both Sarcosuchus and Eocalcaria in early Cretaceous Niger, it would have used this versatility to feed from whichever source was safer. Now let's look at the Daspletosaurus. Its name means frightful lizard, and for good reason. An absolute beast of an animal at 3 to 4 tons in weight and 9 meters in length, it therefore weighed the same as the Suchomimus, but was a full 2 meters shorter. Where Suchomimus extended its mass over 11 meters, Daspletosaurus compacted it into superior jaw power and the ability to crush bone with its teeth. It was an active hunter of tanks like Centrosaurus, and therefore had the experience needed to take down heavy prey. If Suchomimus was a skirmisher, Daspletosaurus was the outright brawler. Round 2, midweight. A lone Suchomimus wades in the shallows of a lake, watching as the sun begins to decline from its meridian. The Suchomimus stops to prod at an empty clamshell, then moves on. Then it halts. Amid the scent of sand and mulch, there is something new, the smell of sweet decay. The Suchomimus sniffs the air, then spots a massive, bulky theropod drinking from the lake. About the same size as an Eocalcaria, but this one is much bulkier. The Suchomimus warbles softly to test the animal's reaction. The Daspletosaurus stops drinking, looks up at the Suchomimus, then resumes its insolent slurping. The Suchomimus takes several sloshing steps closer into shallower waters. The Daspletosaurus rumbles, baring huge teeth. Yet, the Suchomimus continues forward and flexes its claws. The Daspletosaurus fixes both of its amber eyes on the approaching Spinosaurid and snorts. Then the Daspletosaurus jogs forward and meets the Suchomimus in shallower waters, no more than a puddle. The Suchomimus trumpets, using its superior height to try and intimidate the Daspletosaurus. This doesn't work, however, as the Daspletosaurus has faced many ostentatious displays before and lived to fight another day. The Tyrannosaurid observes the Suchomimus for a moment, then charges. A moment later, it is stumbling to the side, 3 massive slices etched into its face. The Suchomimus crows triumphantly and advances. The Daspletosaurus rumbles and turns towards its foe, only to receive another shuddering blow in the shoulder. It spits blood, then twists back around to a surprised Suchomimus, sinking its heavy jaws into the Spinosaurid's neck. The Suchomimus screeches, sending blow after blow into the flesh of the Tyrannosaur's side. The beast does not yield, and the Suchomimus shivers as the teeth of the Daspletosaurus meet its trachea, rupturing the tube and allowing blood into its lungs. The Suchomimus flails, managing to shake off the Daspletosaurus, but not before its mangled neck dangles, bones disconnected. The Suchomimus' eyes roll upward, and the animal crashes into the shallows, blood flowing into the water in pink clouds. The Daspletosaurus wins, but at a heavy cost. The claws of Suchomimus are no joke, and the thumb claws measured around 30 centimeters long, more than long enough to cause immense trauma and damage. Still though, the victory goes to the Daspletosaurus. Powerhouses can definitely dominate, and this is the purpose that tyrannosaurs were built for, crushing power and brute force over speed and finesse. However, if we scale this fight up, will the results remain the same? Here is the fight you've been waiting for. Spinosaurus versus Tyrannosaurus Rex. Spinosaurus, at 16 meters long, was probably the longest land carnivore to ever walk on this planet, yet research shows that perhaps it wasn't even fully terrestrial. Having a paddle-like, flexible tail, conical teeth, and dense bones, it was built to swim and catch aquatic prey. It probably weighed around 7 to 8 tons and spent a lot of time around riparian environments. In contrast, Tyrannosaurus weighed around 8 or 9 tons, despite being 3 to 4 meters shorter. As you can see, tyrannosaurs tend to enact the saying, less is more. Though it was shorter, Tyrannosaurus was pound for pound much more robust than Spinosaurus. Its arms were very short, much shorter than Spinosaurus' own ones. Its jaws, however, were the most powerful of any land animal known to science. Being able to crush bones at around 55,000 newtons, Tyrannosaurus was literally able to kill almost anything with just one bite. Now for the battle. Round 3, Heavyweight. A beachfront, waves hissing and spitting as they laze back and forth across the moist sand. A leviathan sits at the water's edge, cooling its slim snout in the surf. Its sail stands erect, like the Spinosaurus is a beached catamaran. As it lets out a low sigh, it realizes that it is being watched. A chunky predator, large and bulky, watches from the shade of the trees inland. The Spinosaurus grunts and stands up slowly, claws digging into the sand to support its immense weight. It turns slowly, deliberately, to give the Tyrannosaurus the full display of its gargantuan sail before it faces the Tyrannosaur, which also stands up. Both animals walk towards each other, the Spinosaurus carefully balancing its weight with its tail when needed, the Tyrannosaurus much more at ease. The Tyrannosaurus is the first one to snarl, pulling back lips to reveal banana-sized, bone-crunching teeth. The Spinosaurus rears up and turns its side towards the Tyrannosaurus, trying to intimidate it. With a hiss, the Tyrannosaurus lunges, and the Spinosaurus manages to backtrack, causing the Tyrannosaur to overshoot. Yes, it is semi-aquatic, but it is still a theropod. Swinging its crocodilian jaws at its foe, the Spinosaurus aims for the Tyrannosaurus' shoulder. However, the Tyrannosaur slams its head into the Spinosaurus' neck, almost knocking it off balance. No blood drawn. Not yet. The T-Rex rumbles, then clamps its jaws around the Spinosaurus' arm, snapping the humerus instantly. The Spinosaurus shrieks, sinking its teeth into the Tyrannosaurus' flank. Both beasts are locked in a bloody embrace for a few seconds before the Tyrannosaurus almost casually leans into the Spinosaurus, knocking the animal over. With a mighty crash, the semi-aquatic reptile is on its side, bloody jaws snapping at the Behemoths standing over it. Slicing claws across the belly of the Tyrannosaurus with its good arm, it tries to kick at the predator, but the Tyrannosaurus simply recoils at the pain and fixes its jaws around the Spinosaurus' neck. With an ear-splitting crack, the Spinosaurus lies still, and the sand around its neck turns crimson. Now that the Tyrannosaurus won, let's look at what caused the Spinosaurids to lose to the Tyrannosaurs the larger they got. Brute force is one reason. As Spinosaurids grew larger, they retained their slim profiles. Perfect for a piscivorous diet, but not suitable for grappling with larger prey. Tyrannosaurids, however, became increasingly bulky as they grew, allowing them to overpower their prey with overwhelming brute force and massive amounts of damage. This method allowed them to survive until the very end of the dinosaurs, unlike the Spinosaurids who died out somewhere in the mid-Cretaceous. I can already say that this matchup might have been somewhat unfair. The smaller Spinosaurids were capable hunters of terrestrial prey, but the larger they grew, the more specialized they became in catching fish, and the less versatile they became. In the water, however, our Tyrannosaurus vs Spinosaurus battle might have ended in a very different way. Spinosaurus was a much more capable swimmer than T-Rex could ever hope to be, and Spinosaurus would have the overwhelming advantage of mobility. But it is possible that if these beasts ever met, which they never did, the Tyrannosaurus would have been much more dangerous on land than the Spinosaurus. Another thing to note is that in nature, two predatory animals rarely fight to the death. A standard fight typically ends with the wounded loser fleeing and the victor claiming that hereditary kill or any other reward. Anyways, thanks a lot for sticking around till the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Also, if you would like to see more videos like this one, please press that subscribe button. Thank you and see you in the next one.